Hello, hello. Welcome to Courage Becomes Her, where we connect and share real life stories. I'll talk with women whom I love and I'm inspired by, women who are experiencing life just like you and me. I'm excited for us to gather together and cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in life and work.
When there's infidelity or something big like that, the focus is on the broken trust of the person that was unfaithful. But in reality, I had also broken my husband's trust with my criticism, with my judgment, with my avoiding. And so what I was in essence doing is I was rebuilding his trust. And a lot of times we don't understand how that's a two-way street, especially when somebody has broken trust in such a big way, like infidelity or pornography or whatever the thing might be. But the question to ask yourself is, and how have I broken his trust?
That was Jill Savage. All right, I know we've had some heavy conversations these last few weeks about the blessings and burdens of marriage. And today's is going to be heavy as well, but I really want you to listen in to the hope and the encouragement that Jill shares through her story. So Jill is going to talk about how she lived through the betrayal of her husband through his affair with another woman. And what I know that you are going to glean from this, just like I do, is not just how she lived through it and how she survived through it, but how she thrived through it. She talks about just all of the aspects of it, of what it did to her heart and how she came to a place where she knew that she needed to grow and that she needed to work on rebuilding her husband's trust in her. And I am just so blown away by her strength, her humility, her graciousness, her generosity, not only to be forgiving, but to get to that place where she was able to identify areas that she needed to work on and areas where she had, in a way, contributed to the problems within their marriage and had caused for her husband to not trust her. I just, again, know that this is a hard conversation, but it is something that has been so enlightening to me and so encouraging to me and brought so much hope to me that I know it's going to do the same for you. Whether you're walking through infidelity like Jill has, or it's something else where trust has been broken, where maybe it's an addiction, or maybe it's elements of things just from childhood that are creating challenges in your marriage, or where communication is horrible and suffering. So I'm really grateful for you to listen to today's conversation with Jill. Jill is a marriage and relationship coach, and she and her husband, Mark, now have been married for about 4 decades. They have 5 adult children and 8 grandchildren. Obviously, they worked through the challenges that they experienced and through that betrayal and are now in this place where they help couples through their brokenness to heal and to grow through all of the different things that happen in marriage and all of the ways where trust can be broken and relationships can fade or be eroded over time. So thank you so much for listening in to today's conversation with Jill. Jill, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today for the Courage Becomes Her podcast. I'm really grateful to have you with me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll talk about marriage here in just a moment. And I'm just already so looking forward to our conversation because I know you are going to have some just incredible nuggets of wisdom for us. But let's get to know you first. So where is home?
Well, home is Normal, Illinois. And yes, there really is a place called Normal.
Yes, yes, yes. So neat.
It's so crazy. But yeah, our kids went to normal schools. We go to a normal church. We know all the jokes, but it is
That's
a real place.
hilarious. Good, good, good. And you've been there for a long time.
We have, I think it's golly, probably 35 years.
Okay.
Mark and I, we were born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Uh-huh.
But after we got married, and he decided to go into ministry, we moved to Illinois, and we've never gone anywhere else.
Okay, very well. And you live in a farmhouse of sorts, or I
Mhm.
know you welcome people to come to your home for intensives and retreats.
Yeah, it's 113-year-old farmhouse,
Wow.
and we just love it. We're a little bit out in the country, but I like to say I have the best of both worlds because I am surrounded by cornfields and soybean fields, but I am 3.5 miles from the grocery store.
Yeah.
So not too
Yeah.
bad.
No, that sounds great. Good, good, good. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself as far as your love language and your Enneagram, if you know it.
Yeah. My love language is quality time. That
Uh-huh.
is super important to me. And my Enneagram is an Enneagram 1.
Okay. Yes. I think somewhere along the way, I think that either I saw that or heard that, and that's and I am as well. So you and I have that
Yeah.
in relation, in similarity. Yeah. Good.
Hmm.
How about TV or movie, best TV or movie that you've watched in the last year or so?
I would have to say The Chosen.
Okay.
We have watched the Chosen. I think season 3 just came out, and so every time there's a new season, we go back and watch the
The
previous
previous.
ones.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I don't know. It just really it's been powerful for me to watch The Chosen. So I would say The Chosen.
And thank you. Yeah, I don't, you've mentioned that, and I see it in your Saturday email updates as well, that that's a favorite. I still have not watched it, but I know everyone who I know who has said it's just
Good.
very well done. So
It
good.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, good. I know, well, you're an author and a avid reader of books. So what is a book that has transformed your life?
Oh my goodness. Francine Rivers, Redeeming Love.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
book probably taught me how to love at a deeper level than any other book that I've ever read. It was
Wow.
really powerful. So
Wow.
it's a retelling of the biblical book of Hosea,
Hmm.
and it's but it's kind of told in well, it's not really modern times because I think it's set in the 1800s, but it's really, really, really good.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that was probably one of my favorites.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. All right, how about a current obsession? What's something you're currently obsessed with in any genre, app, product, anything, podcast?
No, I'm sitting here drinking a Spindrift, and I would say it is a current obsession. I love the grapefruit Spindrift.
Okay, yeah.
And I love it because so 10 years ago I had breast cancer, and I really had to get serious about my health. And
Mm.
so I gave up all pop. I gave up all, you know, any anything with added sugar. I mean, it just really changed. But when I discovered Spindrift, it's really just it's a flavored carbonated water. So it gives
Mhm.
me that whole um carbonation refreshment, but it's sweetened or just flavored with fruit juice. So it's
Yeah,
just fruit juice and carbonated water. So I thoroughly enjoy
yeah, those are pretty yummy. I can definitely see that for
it.
sure. All right, how about the first concert that you ever went to?
Amy Grant.
All right.
And that was way back when Amy Grant was doing Christian music. And, it was before she crossed over to pop music, but I remember it. It was at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. And that was the very
Oh,
first time I'd ever been to a concert.
that is so I love that because that she was my first concert as well and also
Really?
at the state fair. Yes. That's so
Ah!
wild. Oh my goodness. How fun. I can't remember what year it was for me. I know it was somewhere in the 82, 83, 84 range, but yeah. Oh, how fun.
Yeah,
That's
probably
pretty
same for
special.
me. It was
Yeah.
probably 81 or 82, I'm thinking.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. Oh, super neat. All right, last one. What has made you laugh or filled your cup in the last day or so?
My grandkids.
Mm.
They were here. Our two oldest grandkids, we took care of them just a few days ago for about 3 days while their parents took a little time for themselves. And they just make me laugh. They
Mm.
they really do. I thoroughly enjoyed it. They are 13 and 11.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah, still at a fun stage. Thankfully, not too many bad attitudes. So
So fun. Oh, I love that for you. That's really, really special for sure.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting
Mm-hmm.
us get to know you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're in this series of journeying through the blessings and burdens of marriage. And I have had the privilege of hearing your story through a couple of different podcasts. First was through Growing Home Together with Joanna and Rob Teigen, and
Mm-hmm.
just really being able to get to know you through that. And then being in a personal friendship relationship with client
Mm-hmm.
relationship with you and getting to know you even more so through that has been just absolutely wonderful, encouraging, enlightening, helpful to me. But I asked
Good.
you to join me for today's conversation to share a little bit about your story, but to unpack some aspects of it from just you, Jill, the wife, the woman aspect of it, in hopes that the women within the Courage Becomes Her community will really just be encouraged in either current marital struggles that they're going through or that they have gone through or may go through. And just like knowing what in the world do we do when struggles and hardships, come within marriage? So, kind of a little bit about your story, and I'll link some like Rob and Joanna's episode with you and a couple others just so people can hear your whole story and hear Mark because he's in several of those episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But really, kind of the long and the short of your story was that Mark had an affair, ended up leaving
Mm-hmm.
you to go and be with that other woman. And yet, in the midst of that, like you just remained hopeful and steadfast that he would come back. And through, I think, what you guys basically label as a miracle, he did. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to just share a little bit about that. And then we'll kind of talk through, some various aspects of it as well, of how were you doing, through that revelation and having that information be made known to you that that was happening and so on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. And let me remind you, I've been through breast cancer, and I would say
Yeah.
it was harder than breast cancer.
Mm.
Um, because the pain of betrayal is just huge.
Yeah.
It is so painful. And I certainly never thought it would be a part of our story
Hmm.
ever, but it was. And, my husband was just he was kind of emotionally and spiritually spiraling
Hmm.
after he left full time ministry. He would have told you that his identity wasn't in his job, but not having it really revealed that it was, and that there
Mm.
was a lot. Yeah, that there was just a lot entangled in that. And also, he had a pretty horrific upbringing, and it was an abusive neglectful home environment. And that had raised its head many times, throughout our then 28 years of marriage. And so I knew he was struggling. I knew he often struggled. I just didn't realize how much he was struggling. And I just didn't realize how he was kind of teetering on the precipice of just throwing it all away. And so, yeah, I was definitely heartbroken beyond anything I'd ever experienced. And yet I just had this firm belief that if he would return to his God, he would return to his marriage. And so, and when I would ask God, what do? I would only get, I want you to love him. And I knew honestly that God was giving me that message because I wasn't feeling love for him right at that, So I just was like, okay, Lord, until you tell me something different, I'm going to have to learn how to do that. And so I will say, as hard as that year was, it is the year of my life that I probably experienced the most personal growth. And, they say, there's the old adage, you can become bitter or you can become better. And I really decided to use it for better. I decided that whether my marriage made it or it didn't, I had some things to learn. I had recently become familiar with the concept of love styles or attachment styles. And I came to understand that I was an avoider. And so my avoiding was sending some unintentional messages to my husband, like, I don't need you. And you're too needy, and different messages like that. And I didn't realize that until I started to dig into it. So I'm like, okay, I need to grow emotionally. God was asking me to love. Well, I've never loved somebody who wasn't loving me back. Like, for me, love had always been reciprocal. It had never been loving someone who wasn't returning it. So, oh gosh, okay, I need to grow spiritually, because the only way I can love someone is through God's strength that isn't loving me back. So I've got to grow emotionally. I've got to grow spiritually. I'm now a single parent with 2 teenage boys who are heartbroken, 3 young adult kids that are young adults that are also heartbroken. Everybody has needs. I've got to actually learn some self-care, because nobody's going to give it to me. I've got to take care of myself. So all of a sudden I began to realize I've got a pretty big learning curve, and whether my marriage makes it or doesn't, I still need to learn these things. And so I like to say, when life is crappy, let's use that as fertilizer for our life. And that's exactly what I chose to do. It's part of the reason we have an online course that we created called The Wait Is Not Wasted. And that is for people that are waiting for their spouse to engage in a marriage that they've checked out of, waiting if separation is happening, but you're still believing for the marriage. And, there's not a promise of what the end result is going to be, but there is a promise that you can experience some pretty incredible growth, and that you can increase the possibility that maybe your spouse might be invited back into the relationship with your growth. And that's what I experienced.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, there's just so much in there. There's so many things I can ask. The first thing I'm thinking of is, how in the world did you not take offense to what was happening, in the sense of like feeling like this is a reflection on you, and, be able to think, separate yourself from that, of not feel like it was aimed at you, but it was, stuff that he was going through, his identity issue, his insecurities.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you that I didn't feel rejected. Oh my goodness, I absolutely did. And that that's the broken heart part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think God really was growing my compassion
Mm-hmm.
and my compassion for his woundedness. And so I knew that there were dynamics in our marriage that needed to change, but I also
Mm-hmm.
felt like my husband was using our marriage as a scapegoat for his internal battle that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to dismiss it completely,
Yeah.
where I couldn't see the growth that needed to happen, and I couldn't address that, but I also needed to have a balance in it to
Mm-hmm.
go, this isn't all about me. This
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, he would tell you at that time it was. Now, when we talk about it now with our coaching clients, or when we talk about it now when we're doing an interview or in our books, I mean, he completely says, "Oh, our marriage was a scapegoat for what was going on in my life." But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I don't know. I just feel like God gave me that balanced perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of, hey, yeah, there's some things here that need to be addressed, and for me, it was like, okay, Jill, you know, you need to address these in your life. You're bringing them to the marriage. It's what I brought to the party,
Yeah.
and it was not helpful. So you can either address them in this relationship, or you can address them in the next relationship if there is one.
Mm-hmm.
And let's do our best to maintain an intact family and address them now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I began to do growth. Now, Mark is checked out, and he is, we weren't initially separated, but we eventually were. But he even said, in the few times that we interacted, he noticed a difference in me,
Mm-hmm.
because I was working on these things. I was working to not avoid. I was working on myself. I was working on not being judgmental. I was
Mm-hmm.
working on compassion and empathy and things like that. And so he noticed it, but he didn't trust it,
Yeah.
because he was like, she's just trying to get me back. Like, she's
Mm.
just, what he'll often say, she is just manipulating me.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what it felt like initially, I'm sure, for him. And he didn't trust that it was real, but it went on long enough that he started to go, oh, I actually think this is real. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't just a short term, I'm just gonna convince you to come home and then I'm gonna change. He was like, it went on long enough that he was like, maybe it really is real.
Wow. Wow. That's so incredible.
And you know what about that, Laurel, is that when there's infidelity or something big like that, the focus is on the broken trust of the person that
Mm-hmm.
was unfaithful. But
Mm-hmm.
in reality, I had also broken my husband's trust with my criticism, with my judgment, with my avoiding. And so, what I was in essence doing is I was rebuilding his trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we don't understand how that's a two-way street, especially when somebody has broken trust in such a big way, like
Yeah.
infidelity or pornography or whatever the thing might be.
Yeah.
But the question to ask yourself is, and how have I broken his trust?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really healthy question for us to ask, because most of us, if we're married, we've broken each other's trust in some way.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's such a maturity to what you're talking about, that in this cancel culture that we're living in, and this culture of, I'm just going to bail at the first hardship. I'm blown away, honestly, by your generosity, your humility, your graciousness, and your ability to just say, not only say, I'm going to stick with this, but also to say, I've got stuff I need to fix too. Like, that is just so contrary to what is normal right now and today. Friends, thank you so much for listening to this series about marriage. I know that it has been some hard and some heavy conversation, but I know also that it is being encouraging and bringing hope to all of us, regardless of where we're at in our marriages and what we might be experiencing or going through right now. So thank you so much for your engagement and your participation and for listening. I particularly want to thank Darlene, Jan, Tara, Daisy, and Debbie for commenting and sharing about the podcast over the last week or so, and just would love to have you consider continuing to comment and engage and share particularly with women who you know. And for today's episode, for someone in your life, a woman in your life who is experiencing a difficult time in their marriage and could use some hope and some encouragement, I would love for you to just consider sharing today's episode with that woman in your life. I also just want to give a quick reminder that the Courage Becomes Her podcast is brought to you as a result of my coaching of Laurel Emery and Company. And I'm always looking for new women to work with who could use cultivation of confidence, courage, and joy in their life and work. And I particularly want to thank Sarah, Annette, and Holly for referrals of new clients to me over the last couple of months. So thank you so much for considering that. You can find out more information about my coaching at laurelemery.com. And I'd love to hear from you if you or someone you know might be interested in working with me. So let's get back to the conversation with Jill. So you've talked a little bit about it, but talk a little bit more about like, how in the world did you even come to a place to have that mindset, that perspective, that willingness and to be in that posture?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, and it's really interesting. I think I can even go back to childhood. I remember all the way out, throughout my growing up years, my mom always subscribed to Guidepost magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever read Guidepost, but it's really kind of like God stories,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I remember, I feel like seeds of belief and seeds of faith and seeds of miracles probably were planted in my heart at an early age. And so it just seemed like of course God can do this. Of course. Now I don't know if Mark's going to cooperate with what God's doing, right? Because a lot of times people will be like, well, I don't know why God didn't heal my marriage. And I'm like, oh, God was working on healing your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
But it all depends on what he had to work with, right? And so I think that we have to put the responsibility where the responsibility lies. And so I think that there was that belief, that strong belief in me that God could do it. It was possible. Miracles happen. I think I just naturally am a very loyal person. And that loyalty can become stubborn in a really good way sometimes.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I think that probably was a little like stubbornness. I will say, after it had been, we were coming upon a year, and my friends, my Christian counselor, they were starting to say, Jill, it's probably time for you to start thinking beyond that. The possibility is that your next season of life isn't going to look like what you thought it was going to. Like, they were starting to, okay, I appreciate your standing. I appreciate your believing, but maybe you need to face reality. And that was good for me to do that. I was starting to go, okay, Lord, do I need to entertain that possibility? Do I need to change my stand in any way? But I think that at that point, I didn't feel like I had been given any other marching orders other than love.
Yeah.
And so I was just walking those out as hard as it was, and believing that I was going to learn something in the process.
Yeah. Wow. That's so incredible. I think you alluded to it a little bit, but I mean, you still had two kids at home, so you had to figure out this, you said self-care of like how in the world do you take care of yourself when you're in a place of brokenheartedness, of devastation, of betrayal. So what did that look like for you to attempt to take care of yourself, to also keep life going for your children rather than, just curl up in a ball and hide away?
Well, I think the first part of that was accepting help
Mm-hmm.
and reaching out and letting
Mm-hmm.
people know what was going on. Those closest to me knew Mark was not in a good place. But I think that, particularly I kept a lot under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, my closest friends knew. The kids did not know. The extended family did not know. But when Mark left, I had no choice but
Mm-hmm.
people needed to know. I mean,
Yeah.
literally my kids' teachers the next day needed to know because
Mm-hmm.
they were going to be greeting two boys whose heart had just been ripped out of their chest,
Yeah.
and one of our sons we adopted. So you're
Mm-hmm.
talking a double whammy on rejection,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think accepting help
Mm-hmm.
is, and that's hard for many of us, but that is a form of self-care.
Yeah.
Is when somebody will say, I'm bringing you a meal, and we're like, no, no, I'm fine. It's like,
Mm.
just take the meal.
Yeah.
Just
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that showed up on my doorstep with her suitcase, and she said, my husband, I mean, she was an empty nester, and so she said, my husband said, stay as long as you want, stay as
Mm.
long as you need. And she
Mm.
stayed 3 days with me, the first
Mm.
3 days after Mark was gone. And I could have said, Becky, you're not going to stay with me, that's
Mm.
ridiculous. But instead, I just said thank you.
Mm.
And quite frankly, I don't think I would have eaten those 3 days had it not been for Becky. Like, she was putting food. I think I lost 10 pounds in a week. And she was putting food in front of me, or I would have never eaten anything. And she was making sure my boys had food. Because I mean, those first few days, especially after he left, I was non-functional,
Yeah.
in such deep grief.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably one of the first things was I learned self-care. My counselor also really challenged me. He said, I want you to sit every day and just be. And I was
Mm.
like, what? Like, I'm a doer. I'm not a beer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a doer.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time I did that, I squirmed so badly. Like, I made it like five. I think he wanted me to do it for like 10 minutes in the long
Mm.
haul. And I did it for like 3. And I was like, oh, I am so done with this. But I kept thinking, no, I'm going to do it every day. I'm going to do what he said. And by I don't know, the third or fourth day, I fell asleep
Mm.
sitting in a chair. Now
Mm-hmm.
this is the girl who can't fall asleep in an airplane sitting up. So that was unfamiliar to me, but when I woke up I had the most incredible peace. And I realized he was helping me to learn to just simply meditate, be quiet, calm down, be kind of breathe God in and breathe my stress out.
Yeah.
And that was very powerful.
Yeah. I don't, that even of itself, though, is counter to what we would normally think because it's like, I don't want to sit in silence with these thoughts and be ruminating on the betrayal and the brokenness and the hurt. I can totally understand how hard it would have been.
Yeah, I literally imagined Jesus in front of me and that I was breathing in, like I was breathing him in, and as I was breathing out, I was handing those things to him. I was
Mm,
handing those thoughts. I was handing the betrayal. I was handing
mm,
the hurt.
yeah.
And I, because I think you have to have something to do with those
Yeah.
thoughts, or you're right. You'll just ruminate and it won't be healthy for you. So I think we have to be intentional about how we do that.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well,
it was powerful.
hmm what some people talk about, like, from making sure that you're also like physically taking care of yourself. So obviously, like, through your friend, you were making sure you were getting food because obviously you were, as you said, losing weight. I don't, were there any other things that you did, from that perspective to really take care of yourself?
Yeah, I was taking a walk every day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that it, I didn't, let me tell you, Laurel, I didn't feel like doing that.
Yep.
I had to choose to do it
Yeah. Yeah.
because you don't feel like doing anything
Hmm.
but crawling in bed in the fetal position.
Yeah.
So that was super important to me. I was trying to at least open God's word and just have just a tiny little bit of something that would just give me sustenance or wisdom. But again, I didn't feel like doing that.
Yeah.
I had to go, no, this is the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And, decision is very powerful.
Yeah.
Our emotions are important and they're God given, but they don't always lead us well, and they're not designed to lead us.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so we have to self lead and make some decisions, even when we don't feel
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah. Absolutely. What I know, it wasn't as big of a thing when this happened to you, but social media, can, I think, come into play nowadays for women a lot. And we think that we're just going to scroll and it's going to be a healthy, helpful distraction. But my guess, and I'm not a marriage counselor or coach like you are, but I would think that that's actually a really unhealthy thing to do in extreme situations.
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful because you have to guard your heart when it's so vulnerable.
Hmm.
And so what can often happen on social media is we can start comparing our insides to
Hmm.
other people's outsides.
Hmm.
And then all that does is discourage us.
Yeah.
B, we can even find ourselves attracted or open to conversations with someone that reaches out
Hmm.
to us. In fact, and you know what, I totally look back and say this was spiritual warfare, but I had two different high school guy friends that reached out to me during that time.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's not a coincidence. That's
Hmm.
not a
Hmm.
coincidence. And so I remember my friend Becky said to me, she said two really powerful things to me during my wait. She said, first, Jill, don't make saving your marriage an idol.
Hmm.
And that was really powerful because there were times I was making it an idol. Like I
Hmm.
was almost worshiping saving my marriage.
Hmm.
But secondly, she really challenged me. She said, you're going to have to guard your heart because there's going to be temptation. Somebody's going to show you a little bit of attention.
Hmm.
Somebody's going to show you, they're going to reach out to you and tell you you're pretty. And
Hmm.
that is, your heart is in a really vulnerable place. So you're going to have to really guard your heart.
Yeah.
And she was right. I mean, you have to be really intentional about that. And so, back to, social media with self care, I think that, it's fine to do a little bit of that, but man, that's a black hole you can fall
Yeah.
into real fast.
Yeah.
So, if you enjoy it, okay, set the timer for 10 minutes and do it for
Hmm.
10 minutes and then just turn it off,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that you don't fall into the black hole and you don't, it doesn't cause more problems
Yeah.
than what you already have.
I really appreciate what you said about, people reaching out to you. And I think there is such a healthiness in ghosting people when you sense that that might be a temptation, or even if it's not a temptation for you, you've guarded your heart, as you said, but it's there and presenting itself. So I don't, what, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, in general, and my husband's affair was with an old high school girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, um, you get somebody from your past that reaches out, someone from the opposite sex from your
Mm-hmm.
past that reaches out. The best thing to do is just to not respond.
Yeah.
And that feels mean. That
Yeah.
feels wrong, but it is the healthiest thing for your marriage.
Yeah.
You don't want to engage that. And so the best thing to do is hit delete and probably block.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just so that it's not hanging out there and they don't reach out again. And then you have to keep making that decision over and over, and then it wears you down.
Yeah.
We're just firm believers. And, I mean, this is what we do full time now. I mean, we never thought that God would turn our pain into such purpose. But I will say it happens more often than what people realize. We call it the slow fade of naivety.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be naive, and recognize that you have to actively protect your marriage. And so, if somebody reaches out to you, delete, block,
Yeah.
just don't even engage it.
Yeah. That's good. Really good. So you talked about accepting help, and I think that that does feel like an area that is maybe uncomfortable in the sense of how do we, and you talked about like, only letting certain people know. So how do we kind of have the conversation, or how do we know what the boundaries are in sharing about the difficulties that are happening in a marital relationship without disrespecting our husbands, and kind of moving it into a place of, I'm just going to air my husband's dirty laundry, so to speak, because I want to feel vindicated or supported or whatnot. So
Right.
where's that line of, reaching out, asking for help, inviting people into that conversation, but not letting it teeter over that edge?
Yeah. So, I mean, the hard part is obviously you can't talk about, I mean, when you're married, two become one. So what one does affects the other.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that is part of the reason we also don't reach out for help, because we want to protect the other person. And
Yeah.
to some degree, yes, you want to do that, because you don't need it all out there, because then you don't even remember who to untangle it with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, for me, I mean, I was a public figure already as an author and a speaker and leader of a huge ministry. So I did choose to actually put it on my blog. I did a blog post. I think I titled it "My Heart is Broken."
Mm.
And, just simply said that my husband, I did it when he left, that my husband had chosen to separate. This is not what I want. It is
Mm.
not what I believe needs to happen.
Mm.
But he has to make his own choices. And if you'll pardon me for being a little missing in action, I have a family to take care of. And now at that point, I knew about the infidelity, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't put that out there.
Mm-hmm.
And because my goal was for him to come home. That was his story to tell at that point, not my story to tell. So I think, though, obviously most people listening, they're not going to be in a public setting, but they're going to have private conversations. And so in those private conversations, it is communicating the facts.
Yeah.
The fact is that he has left, depending on how close they are and how trustworthy they are. If
Mm-hmm.
there's been something like infidelity, you want a very small circle that knows everything, a very small circle, and they have to be trustworthy. And others might know that things have been hard at home, but they don't have to know details.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you just things have been hard and
Yeah.
that's all they need to know. But those that are closest, I think that the most important thing is that you talk about your own growth,
Mm-hmm.
your own emotions, your own feelings. If they start to talk about the other person, if it's a factual question, then answer the question. But if it is, them wanting to badmouth him or anything like that, it's like, I'm not going to go there. Like,
Yeah.
you've got to draw some boundaries. I'm choosing to still believe the best in that man.
Mm-hmm.
He's he's making some poor choices, but I don't believe that his heart is bad. I think his heart is confused.
Mm.
So sometimes I had to lead those, but more often I led by example because I was
Yeah.
primarily talking about how I was doing.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's really, really good direction. So, just to round out for your story, so you alluded to it, but Mark did come back after a year-ish.
Mm-hmm. He
Yeah.
sure did. He made a huge turnaround it was actually on Easter Sunday of 2012. And I didn't trust it at first,
Hmm.
but in the same way that he didn't trust me at first, right? In the
Right.
changes I
Yeah.
was making, trust is rebuilt by consistent changed behavior
Hmm.
over
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
It's the only way to rebuild trust. So, in time, it became obvious that he had left the other relationship. He really had recommitted to our family.
Mm.
He opened his life up. He opened his phone up. He opened everything up.
Hmm.
And so he did the work to
Yeah.
rebuild trust. And so, we call it his U-turn. Easter Sunday was his U-turn. He didn't move home for another 2.5 months.
Mm.
Um, we began to engage on a daily basis. We went back to marriage counseling. We started doing the work,
Yeah.
but he didn't actually move back home until then. And it still took us, even after he moved back home, it was another about 12 months after that, between 12 and 18 months, that we did the work of
Yeah.
healing. And we kind of kept it to ourselves for a while, the whole journey. But eventually, Mark felt like God was really tapping him on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, it's time. It's time to start,
Mm.
like, share the whole story."
Hmm.
So I chose to do that through what we called a blog series.
Mm.
We called it the No More Perfect blog series. And we put the whole story out there over 10 days. Like, we did a daily blog for 10 days. And my blog readership went from 5,000 to 15,000 overnight.
Wow. Yeah.
So obviously, some people are just curious, but many people needed to know they weren't alone.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that honestly eventually opened up the door for our No More Perfect Marriages book that we
Mm.
wrote. And that really opened the door to marriage ministry. And that's what we do full time now, is we help couples who have good marriages become great marriages. And then we help couples who are in crisis find the hope and the help that they need.
I love that. So beautiful. Thank you. So, our closing out question of who or what is inspiring courage in you today?
Oh, goodness. I think that I am always, I don't know, God's word is my number one inspiration. And when I look at the people that are in the Bible and the courage that they had to exude
Mm.
to walk things out when they didn't understand,
Yeah.
that's just huge for me. And so looking at them through human eyes and the human that they were, not understanding always the big picture. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But I will say a second one, and that is, we are actually getting ready to go to Uganda in
Mhm.
about 7 weeks. And the young man that initially connected us is just a man of great faith, but of great courage.
Mm.
And every time I'm around Daniel, I feel like I get just a little bit more encouragement. And
Mm.
so he inspires me as well.
I love that. So beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being with me and having this conversation today. I know that it's going to be really helpful. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
If you've been around the Courage Becomes Her podcast for any length of time, you know that one of the main reasons that I started this podcast was to remind us that we are not alone in whatever it is that life is presenting to us. Oftentimes, we just have this tendency to become so isolated and to feel like we are the only ones who experience the struggles that we're experiencing, we're the only one going through a particular transition, and just all of those things. And I love through today's conversation with Jill that she reminds us that we are not alone. And as she and I talked about, I know it is really difficult for us to talk about our challenges in marriage. There seems like there is such a fine line between opening up and talking about our struggles and disrespecting our spouses. And I really appreciate that conversation because it is so important for us to be able to have, whether that it's that couple of trusted friends or a counselor, someone in our life that we can really talk openly with about what it is that we're struggling with and going through within our marriage relationships. So thank you so much for listening to today's conversation. Again, as I said in the beginning, it was so encouraging to me to have this conversation with her. And we're not all experiencing infidelity like Jill experienced. We may be, experiencing something totally different, and our marriage may be having a struggle of a different sort. But the principles that she talks about of how it is that we take care of ourselves through accepting help, getting counseling, again, sharing with our friends who are closest with us, of finding that place where we can grow and focusing on our own growth, just those transcend whatever the actual issue or situation is that you might be experiencing in your marriage. So I truly know and believe that it is helpful to you to hear that just as much as it has been for me. So thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Jill. And please don't forget to go on to whatever podcast player you're using and press that 5-star button and leave a review. I would really love for you to do that so that we can share this with more women. Thank you so much. What an honor to help you to cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in your life and work. Thank you so much for inviting me to journey with you. I look forward to being back with you next week, where we'll hear another story from a woman whom I love and am inspired by and look forward to learning from.